Hello and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you how to cut a stylish asymmetric corset that has an overbust corset with a pointy edge and a basic 3-part corset. So if this is something you like, please don't forget to hit on the subscribe button. So let's dive right into today's video. So here is my pattern paper, and I'll go ahead to start with marking my basic measurements, which also includes my shoulder to bust line, which is 9 inches, shoulder to under bust line, which is 12 inches, my shoulder to waist line is 17 inches, and after that I'll be adding about 5 inches from my waistline, which will be giving me a total length of 22 inches. So now you can decide to use that or use any length of your choice. So the best is just to go ahead to add 5 or 6 inches from your waistline. So I'll just go ahead and repeat all those marks, and after that I'll draw a straight line connecting it. So after that, I'll just go ahead to label my pattern as my shoulder to bust line, shoulder to under bust, shoulder to waist, shoulder to top length, so which is 5 inches away from my waist. So for this pattern, you can also use a bust dart if you want, but using a bust dart might be too complicated for a beginner. So I went ahead to mark my shoulder divided by 2, which is 14 divided by 2 will give me 7 inches, and I went ahead to mark a basic neckline of 3 by 3 inches. This will be serving as a guide when we are marking out this pattern. So now from that point, I marked my shoulder divided by 2. I'll come down by 1 inch, and I'll go ahead to connect to my shoulder line this way. Now the next step is to go ahead to find your chest line, which is your bust circumference divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches. Mine is 7. I went ahead to mark, and also mark back what you have on the shoulder just to have a straight line. So after I'm done marking, I'll just mark what I have from my chest line to my bust point, which is about 1 inch, and I'll go ahead to mark to the end, and after that I'll draw a straight line at that point. After I'm done doing that, I'm just going to divide what I have at the armhole into 2, mark, and I will be coming in by ½ inch. So from that point, I'll go ahead to my chest line and mark my bust circumference divided by 4, connect from my bust circumference to the armhole, and I'll go ahead to connect upwards. So after I'm done connecting, this is what I have. I'll go ahead and mark my nipple to nipple divided by 2, or my bust span divided by 2. So which is 7 inches divided by 2, I have 3.5 inches. And I'll go ahead to mark at the bust, under bust, waist, and top length. After I'm done doing that, I'll just go ahead to connect all the way up and connect to the rest of my pattern. At the shoulder part, I'll be dividing my shoulder into 2 equal parts. That is the remaining part of my shoulder. That is what I will be marking. So from there, I'm going to blend it down to my bust line, not my chest line, but my bust line. I'll go ahead to connect. So after I'm done doing that, I'll go ahead to mark my basic dart intake. I'll be using 1 inch on both sides, and I'll be using a straight dart. So if you're a plus size, you'll be considering using 1.5 inches on both sides. Now after I'm done doing that, I'm just going to place my ruler, and I'll connect and draw out a straight line at those points. After I'm done connecting my pattern, this is what I have. So now you want to connect from your bust down to your under bust, and you're also going to repeat this at the other side of your pattern. Go ahead to connect from your bust down to your under bust this way. So for this pattern, I'll be using a shoulder dart. So I'll go out from that line I marked at the shoulder by 2 inches. So if you're a plus size, you can go ahead and use 2.5, 3 inches. It is still okay. Now I'll be connecting this to my bust, and these 2 inches I marked, I'm going to be replacing it at the shoulder part of my pattern this way. And after that, I'll just go ahead to reconnect it to the armhole of my pattern, and I will connect it back. So this is what I have, and I'll go ahead to use my marker to mark this out so that it will be more visible for you to see. So next, I'm going to go ahead to determine where I want my cup to start. So considering the other side of the cup that has a basic cup corset, I'm going to be using 1.5 inches. So you can also go ahead to use 2 inches. So I'll extend my chest line, and now I'll go ahead to mark my bust circumference divided by 4. Measure this dart intake I have at that 1.5 inches, replace it, and I'll add my sewing allowance. Going down to my under bust, I'm going to mark my under bust circumference divided by 4, and after I'm done marking that, I'm going to measure the dart intake of 2 inches, replace, and add my sewing allowance. So if your dart intake is 3 inches, you're also going to replace that. So going down to the waistline, if you want to snatch your waistline, I'm going to be taking 4 inches from my waistline. My waistline is 28. Minus 4 inches, I have 24. So 24 divided by 4, I have 6. I'll mark it, measure the dart intake of 2 inches, and add my sewing allowance to that. So at the hip point, at the top length, I'll be marking my hip circumference divided by 4. I'll measure the dart intake, replace, and I will be adding my sewing allowance. So the next step I want to take is just to go ahead to connect from my chest line to the bust point to the under bust, from the under bust to the waist, and from the waist to the top length. So after I'm done marking, this is what I have. So now you want to go ahead and cut out your pattern before we go ahead to alter this. So I'll go ahead and cut it out, and at the neckline of my pattern, I'll just go ahead and notch it as a guide, and I'll open up my pattern. So whatever I have on this side, I'll go ahead and remark it on the other side. So I've gone ahead to repeat or remark what I have on this side, and I will be opening up my pattern this way to mark out the rest of my dress. So since I've already gone ahead to snatch out my waistline, I won't be adding any dart to my pattern. What I'll be adding is a style line to it. So I'll just go ahead to draw out a straight line on this part, and I'll be repeating the same process on the other side of my pattern also. So now after I'm done marking that, I'm just going to outline it, and now we will go ahead to mark out our neckline. I'll first of all go ahead and blend in my dart, and I will draw out the pointy part of this Victorian corset. I came down by 3 inches from my shoulder, and I'm going to connect this way to that point. So after that, I'm going to go ahead to connect this all the way down to the chest line. So this is the center part of my pattern. I'll be coming down by ½ inch from my chest line, and I will mark. This will be serving as a guide. Then from here, I'll just go ahead to blend it all the way to that point. So after I'm done doing this, I'll be using my marker to mark this out. So I'll go ahead and use my marker to make this more visible for you to see. So after I'm done doing this, from that point, I'll go ahead to start drawing out my cup. Now I'll place my curve drew, and I will connect it to the under bust of my pattern this way. So after I'm done doing that, I'll just go ahead to use my marker to outline this. So at this point, remember we went up by 1.5 inches after our chest line. So I'm going to connect from that point to that 1.5 inches. And if you notice, the cup is a little bent or is not too straight. And I'll connect also to my armhole. So remember, from your armhole and your bust circumference, divide what you have there into 2, and I'll mark. And from that point, I'm just going to go ahead to mark this out so that it will be visible, and then we'll go ahead to continue marking out our cup pattern. So I'll go ahead, connect from that point I divided from my armhole, and I'll connect it to the lower part. So this is what I have on this part, and I'll blend it to my armhole. So from my bust point, I'll be coming down by ½ inch, then connect it down or upwards to my bust point. Repeat the same process at the other side and connect, and I'll use my marker to outline it. So here is my 3-part corset on this part of my pattern. So at this point at my cup, I'm going to blend it a little just for it to look exactly like what we have on the thumbnail, because here connected to the other side of the pattern very well. So after that, I'm going to go ahead to create another style line on this pattern at the center, just like we have on the thumbnail. So I'll just label my pattern so that I don't get to mix it up. And now we'll start working on the lower part of this pattern. But before that, go ahead and label your cup so that you don't misplace each part of your cup for the other side. Now, to work on the lower part of my pattern, I'll be coming up by 2 inches from my top length, and I'll just go ahead to connect it. So I'll be using more like a free hand to do this. So I'll go ahead to blend up my cup from the lower part just to the other side. So watch me while I'm doing this. I actually used a freehand sketch to achieve this, but at the end of the other side of the pattern, I connected it up by 2 inches, just like we have on the thumbnail. So after that, I went ahead to just cut out my pattern. And at this point, if you haven't yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, please don't forget to hit on the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and also subscribe to my second YouTube channel, which is Draft by Maki. We also have drafting tutorials there. And if you have any question concerning this particular pattern illustration, please don't forget to leave your comments at the comment section. Go ahead and follow me on my Instagram page at Maki's Closet and at my personal page at Maki's Suite. And you can also follow me on TikTok at Maki's Closet. I also do drafting tutorials there as well. So after I'm done cutting out my pattern, this is what I have. So next we'll be moving over to the back pattern of this dress. So now here is a basic back pattern that I've already gone ahead to cut out, and I'll be using it for my back pattern. So I'm going to be marking my nipple to nipple divided by 2, which we also marked out in front. So this basic pattern is also just like the front. So for the waistline, I'll be marking 1/2 inch on both sides, come down by 1 inch at the bust, and I will connect upwards. So after I'm done connecting, I'll just go ahead to connect it to the lower part of my pattern, or just come down 4 inches from the waistline. And after this, I'll be inserting my measurement, which is my bust circumference divided by 4, mark my sewing allowance. At this point, I'll mark my waist circumference divided by 4 and mark my sewing allowance. So remember, the waist circumference we are using at the back is -4 inches from our waistline. So at the top length, you'll be marking your hip circumference divided by 4 and also add your sewing allowance. So when you're sewing this, actually it's best to use about 1/2 inch so that you will not have much seam allowance. And I'll just go ahead to connect my pattern all the way to the lower part. So this is what I have, and I'll be dividing what I have at this point into 2 to create another style line for my pattern. And I'll just go ahead to draw out a straight line. So this is what I have, and the next step is just to go ahead to create the lacing bar area, and I'll be using 1.5 inches. So this is not a standard. You can go ahead and use 2 inches, 2.5. It totally depends on what you want. Now I'll be making a dot just to indicate that that will be serving as my lacing bar area, and I'll come down by 1/2 inch at this point and connect it back to my chest line, just to make sure that I don't have the back pattern popping up after you're done lacing your dress. So I'll just go ahead and label this, outline this, and after that I'll just go ahead and mark about 2 inches at this part. But at first I marked 1 inch and I connected it, but I'm just going to go ahead to reconnect this later. So if you're using this for an inbuilt corset, the back pattern is always shorter at the back, but if you're using this as a top on top of a skirt, this is also okay. So I'll cut this out and I'll go ahead to readjust this pattern, because if you're using it for an inbuilt corset, and remember we did not make use of a bust start for this pattern, the back pattern has to be lower than the front pattern to enable you sit properly when you're putting on this dress. So after I'm done cutting, just like I said, I'm just going to go ahead to mark the 1 inch from the waistline, and I'm going to readjust. But before readjusting for the 2 inches, I'll just go ahead to do this in case you're using this for a blouse. This is also okay. But since if you're using this for an inbuilt corset, you have to go up by 2 inches, which is the same thing we did at the back pattern of this dress. So with this, we have come to the end of today's tutorial. Please don't forget to hit on the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Thanks.